Okay, now we're on to the Pershing tank. Now the Pershing tank is okay, but I see a lot of players using this tank, and to me this tank is a waste of money. It costs $75 just to research to get, plus another $40 per tank. There's just no point to make these tanks in my opinion. They have one extra armor than the Sherman. Yes, they do 2 more damage to other tanks, but to me they're a big waste of income. I believe they're fairly slow. I don't think they're a very fast tank in game. Yes, they have a turret. They're better than heavy or they're better than super heavy tanks, which are in Proto Base, which we'll get to later, because they have a turret and they can fire while moving. But there's just so much money invested in just a one tank that any AT will take this down. Any advanced AT will take this down, especially the wooded when you can't see it. Any fighter bomber will take this down. A couple fighter bombers will blow this up, and it can become a waste. If you need to make a bunch of these tanks, and if you're investing so much money into Pershings, I don't see how you can win a battle with just Pershing tanks. You'd have so much money invested into these tanks that if you lost all of them, you would pretty much be crippled, and you just be GGing against the other opponent, especially in 1v1s or 2v2s. They're not a tank I would recommend using at all. I would stick to the medium and advanced medium tanks for 1v1, 2v2, since they cost much less, and you can do a lot more things with mediums and advanced mediums over an advanced heavy. So the Pershing is out. I would not use it. There's so many cons and not enough pros, obviously. Yeah, it is 4 armor, but would not use this unit ever. I have not used this unit ever, and I will not use this unit. There's just too much money invested just for one tank. And if you mass produce these, I just don't see how you could win a battle, because all your money would be into these tanks, and that would pretty much be your entire army composition. Now we're on to the anti-tank base. This is where you get all of the units to stop all the armored base units, and sometimes the barracks building units. The basic anti-tank gun, $10, the M1 57mm. It's a pretty good tank gun, actually. Its distance is fair. It can get outshot by the advanced heavies, the heavies, and the super heavies. It can get outranged if they have recon. So they're good, very good early game. For $10, you can put a bunch of these in the woods with a couple infantry, maybe a couple wooded AA guns, and your recon vehicles, and these will eat anything that comes your way early game. Late game, though, not a good unit to use. By the late game, mid to late game, you should be upgraded by now to the next unit, which is a very good unit, which is the M5 76mm. This anti-tank gun is incredible in the woods. I believe it has a max range, or at least 550 meter range, which I believe is the max for tanks. So you have that wood advantage. So if you're in the woods and that opponent doesn't have any recon and you do, you'll get the max range out of this unit in the woods, and you have the element of surprise. This will one-shot pretty much any tank in the game. As you can see, it's got 4 stars, and it can pretty much drop almost any tank in the game, except it'll two-shot the super heavies, the heavy. I believe it can actually one-shot a heavy, but it probably two-shot any heavy or super heavy tank. But you obviously don't build one of these units for $10. There's only there's a $50 research cost, but this is well worth it for mid to late game. That $50 is well worth it to get these M5s. For $10, you can put 5 of these into the woods, and they will completely destroy a tank rush. It'll destroy AA, any artillery, and just decimate anything that's on tracks. Yes, it is vulnerable to artillery or bombing runs, but if you lose a couple of these, depending on obviously where you lose them, if you lose them in front of your base, they're going to be detrimental to your success, obviously, if you're losing them right in front of your base, because you'll get tank rushed. But if you lose like 3 of these, the cost is so low that you can just mass produce more and put them back out in the field, and you're back to where you started. So a very good unit to use in this game for the Americans, and the cost is perfect, I would say. Anything more, if they were $20 a unit, there'd be no chance of me buying these units. But at $10 for $50 research price point, it's a great unit to use mid to late game by far. Now on to the big boys of the anti-tank. We have the Wolverine, $15. The range is really good. It can one-shot pretty much any early tank in the game, except for the German tanks, which need researching, so I wouldn't really count that as early game tanks, but the Wolverines are very good. They're only susceptible to other, obviously, anti-tank weapons. They don't really get damaged by airstrikes. Fighter bombers, obviously, they're weak against, but this is a very good unit early game. You can use these, but when I play, I prefer the element of surprise over having this in the field, since you can put the wood AT in the woods and surprise the enemy over having a tank destroyer getting killed by that wood AT when you're trying to make your push. So I wouldn't recommend getting the Wolverine. It's good for $15 if you like the tank-based AT. It's a good unit to get early game, but for 1v1, I would say you're probably going to end up using the wood AT much more. So I'd probably invest in that instead of the Wolverine. But it's still a good unit. It's still, for its value, it's still a good unit to use early game. For mid to late game, though, you're going to want the Jackson. It eats anything on tracks, like the wood AT. It's also a $50 upgrade, but it's well worth it for the cost. It's only $20 to produce. It is so cheap. You can mass produce these, and you will run through tanks if you have a tank, anti-tank composition in your army. These have a max range, and they get one-shotted by heavies. I believe heavies, at least super heavies, I know that for sure. Maybe advanced heavies as well. They guarantee get one shot. But if you have a bunch of these and they can attack that heavy before the heavy gets there, especially with that recon for max range, they're very, very good tank to mass or anti-tank to mass produce and push on your enemy with. They will completely destroy anything below a heavy tank in one shot, and then you're free to push in there with your tanks and pretty much take the enemy down. So 1v1, an amazing tank or anti-tank weapon, to use 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2. Just the price is perfect, and the research upgrade is it's where it should be. On next to the airfield, the unarmed air recon, good unit. Again, recon, most important thing in this game by far, aside from strategy and knowing what to counter, but recon is the most important thing. Americans have a pretty good airfield. I wouldn't recommend going air as the United States. They have their artillery, armor, and anti-tank is where you want to be if you're going to be using the Americans. Airfield's good if you're going to throw a surprise attack in there. If you are building armor all game, and then say like 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in, they don't have any AA, you throw down a camo net and a radio silence in your base, drop an airfield, research 1 or 2 recons, get a couple of bombers, which I'll show soon enough in this video, get a couple of those, and then do a sneak attack, then the airfield is worth it. But any other time, no, airfield's not worth it for the Americans. There's too many countries have too many good AA guns to bring air down in this game, and the cost of the air units for the States is not that great, so I wouldn't recommend getting air for United States, but nonetheless I'll go through the units.